Welcome, everyone. This is the official Q&A of Watson for Doc Equinox, part of the Hamptons Doc Fest, which will start streaming this and two other films on Earth Day, April 22nd. I have with me, very honored to have Leslie Chilcott and Captain Paul Watson, who made this wonderful, wonderful, very important film that I'm really calling mandatory viewing. Leslie, you have quite a varied and outstanding portfolio. Code Girl, about high school girls designing apps. It Might Get Loud, about Jimmy Page and Jack White. Wish I could have been there for that one. An Inconvenient Truth, about Al Gore, which was about global warming, which won an Academy Award. Congratulations on everything. And we could spend this whole time just talking about your films. But let's talk about Watson. How did this happen? How did you two get together?
Thank you so much for including us, by the way. We really appreciate it, and we're honored to be here. It started, it's a long story, which I'm going to condense, but it's basically twofold. One, my husband, who's a very serious person, was asked who his hero was at a dinner party, conversation starters. And he's like, oh, I don't really have any heroes. And they're like, come on, who's your hero? And he goes, well, if I were to have a hero, it would be Captain Paul Watson. And right after that, I was going to a party in Los Angeles to honor a bunch of environmental activists. And of course, we were traveling in like a biodiesel bus or something like that. I don't remember exactly the bus type, but I'm sitting there on the bus and everyone is dressed formally. It's an evening event. Almost everyone is wearing black. And we're about to go. And all of a sudden, someone runs on the bus. And she's blonde and blue-eyed and beautiful and wearing a white dress. And she's walking towards the back of the bus where I'm sitting. And I'm like, who is this person? And she sits down next to me and she says, hi, I'm Ferris Smith. I'm from Sea Shepherd. And I was like, oh, hi, I'm Leslie Chilcott. I'm from Filmland. Or I didn't know, what to say to that. And by the end of the bus ride, I was like, why has no one made the definitive film about, Captain Paul? And she got up and said, I don't know, why don't you make it? And we exchanged cards, and that's literally how it all started. And on a more serious note, I feel like I've made a few projects and will continue to do so about climate change, but none that focused on the ocean. And there is a lot that people don't know simply because they can't see what's going on out there.
Yeah, I have made environmental films and think I know a lot about this issue. I follow it a lot. No, if this was such an eye-opener to me and my wife, we watched it together, and that's why I keep saying it's mandatory viewing. You filmed around the world. Lucky that Captain Paul had documented everything he did at sea. I would assume this would be a very different film if you didn't have all of that footage.
Oh, it would be an incredibly different film. I mean, very fortunately, and as Paul says in the films, very early on, he realized the importance of the media and capturing things. He could just witness these things out there in the middle of the ocean and nothing would happen, but if they're documented. So for us, it was a treasure trove of goodness. And in addition to that, there was an entire storage unit of boxed ancient tapes and things that we spent months transferring and digitizing. And even Sea Shepherd themselves had, I think, 166 terabytes that hadn't yet been uploaded. And we were able to take that on and make sure that got done. And we had interns every day in their server tagging the footage, by like the location or what the incident was and all of that to sort of help make the archive more robust.
So how many hours of footage were you dealing with?
I know this is like a favored question, but when we start getting up there,
I'll never ask it again.
It feels like too much pressure, it's a lot.
Yeah. Captain Paul, so you were a founder of Greenpeace. You were kicked out because you were too much of an activist. You wanted to do more, so you started Sea Shepherd. Correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong, which watching you in action and your team and teams as it developed, it felt like you started a military-like organization, a military-like movement. Did you, because you were real activists, I mean, you were out there not just waving flags, as you say about what Greenpeace like to do. Did you grapple with how far you would go in this activism, in these confrontations? Was there a line that you thought, I'm not going to cross, or was it really on a case-by-case basis?
Well, I don't think that it would, it's modeled on any military model, really. My past experiences with the Canadian Coast Guard, which is non-military, and with the Scandinavian Merchant Marine. So yes, because we have ships, we're structured in a hierarchical form with, captains, officers, and whatever. But right from the beginning, I established a strategy which I call aggressive nonviolence. And we're going to be aggressive, and we're going to get in their face, and we're going to shut down these operations. We're interventionists, we're not protesters, but we're not going to hurt anybody. And we've had an unblemished record for 42 years.
It seems kind of amazing, given what we got to see, that no one seemed to ever get seriously injured or even killed.
Well, yeah, it's we take a lot of precautions, and one of the criticisms that we've had over the years is that a lot of our crew are amateurs, they're not professionals. But if you go back to 1911, when Ernest Shackleton was criticized by the London Times because his crew were all a bunch of amateurs and not professionals, and he said, I need people with the passion to get where I need to go, and professionals aren't going to do that for me. And that's what I found. I mean, I couldn't pay people to do what my volunteers do for nothing. The work, the hours they put in, the risks they take, you can't pay people to do that. So that is the strength of Sea Shepherd, is our volunteer base.
Yeah, the film rightly makes this a dramatic, confrontational. There's always something happen, but the fact is that you're probably spending 95% of your time on board ship just traveling to the next point, or waiting, or trying to figure it out. And yet you have all these volunteers. Is there big training going on during these downtimes so that they are not just sitting around, waiting and watching?
We never really have any downtimes. There's usually about a dozen campaigns going on at once. But when volunteers join the crew, yes, they're all trained in their different departments, whether that be the deck, the galley, the engine room, or the bridge. So yeah, everybody goes through a training process, and it's an ongoing thing. But right now we're doing so many campaigns, I can't even keep track of them. We have 12 ships out on the sea. There's about between 250 to 300 volunteers at any given time from 25 different countries. And so it's Sea Shepherd has evolved from being an organization to it's now a global movement, and we're registered in over 24 countries. So it's there's really no downtime.
Yeah. Leslie, are you a diver?
I am now.
The whale footage was extraordinary. I've never seen whales seemingly resting vertically, just sort of hanging out together.
Yeah.
Did you shoot a lot of the whale footage and other underwater footage, or did you license it?
We did a combination of both, and those beautiful vertical whales took those cinematographers years to find and get just right. So I want to give credit where credit is due. We licensed that footage from outtakes, and that was just beautiful. We also, people spend years getting this footage, and you have to ask yourself, do I have the right to go and try and get my own version of this footage, or should I stay out of the ocean? So sort of what we did is, where we could find the footage that said what that went with what Paul was saying, we would license it. But I think every humpback whale in the film, except one, we filmed. So all of those super close-up shots of the humpbacks we filmed. Paul tells this, story about Spaceship Earth. And I had that which you'll see in the film, and I had this idea that we needed to get underneath the humpbacks. And surprisingly, there was not a lot of footage. So we went to the Kingdom of Tonga, And there it's free diving. You're not allowed to scuba dive with the whales. And our wonderful cinematographer, Christian Demetrius, who's from Brazil, we spent days trying to get, underneath these humpbacks. And we found this mom and calf that were just really welcoming to us. And in our 2 weeks of filming, we spent 4 days with them, and they would let us do all sorts of things. And I wanted to differentiate some of our footage a little bit from the beautiful natural history footage. I wanted it to be messier and not perfect. And Christian even turns the camera as the whale moves a couple of times. And I wanted people to have that immersive experience, because swimming with a whale or a shark, these are life-changing events. You're like, I had no idea there was this kind of intelligence. But I did go out to Cocos Island. We went on a 10-day trip to Cocos Island in Costa Rica. Such a privilege to be able to dive there. And so glad I had my certification so I could participate in everything. And I think as a filmmaker, it's one thing to sit on the boat and look at a monitor while everybody else is down there. You need to go and experience, a shark touched my knee as it went by. And this is so amazing. And you need to experience, these things. There's that scene in the film where there's like an alley of sharks coming towards the camera. That was an amazing, beautiful experience. And I wanted people to see that, these aren't the sharks of, storybooks, that, most sharks do not attack humans unless there's some other reason. And that's a long and complicated answer. But, the reality is worldwide, there are 5 or less shark deaths per year. So they are extremely rare. And swimming and filming with them is a total pleasure. And I hope people look at them differently after seeing this.
Well, I don't know. We certainly had our hearts in our throats watching those sharks coming so close. So let's talk about Marshall Mcluhan, which Captain Paul, did you just happen to be in the lecture when you were in college and you saw him? Clearly he became a big influence. Clearly he became a very interesting and an important part of the film. Was it just that one lecture? Did you seek him out and talk to him afterwards?
Well, I was a communications major at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver in Canada, and it was a visiting lecture. He was a professor at the University of Toronto. And so, yeah, that was a very influential lecture as far as I was concerned. But also, people forget that the reason that Greenpeace became so prominent is that it was an organization that was actually founded by journalists, broadcasters, writers, and communications people who understood the power of media. And in the early days, we actually called ourselves Mcluhan's Warriors. And so, yeah, it was a very profound influence on the emergence of Greenpeace. And of course, that carried on when I, set up Sea Shepherd.
Leslie, the interviews and the voiceover with Mcluhan, I thought was really brilliant. You often didn't know that it was him speaking because it was so timely, it was so present, it was so of today. And was that quite a surprise for you to learn that you had this footage of him, that he even could become a character in the film?
In a way it was. I mean, you always, he was such an outsized influence on Paul and many people. And when you go back over 50 years and you listen to what someone was saying, which is so dead on for right now, I mean, other than the footage looking completely different in the wardrobe, it's like all of the early protests about the environment, it's exactly the same. Like, we've come so far, yet we haven't moved at all. So that scene, everything he said was so relevant. That scene was originally about 12 minutes long because everything made sense. And we're like, okay, this is ridiculous. We can't go away for 12 minutes and talk about Marshall Mcluhan. So we went back to Paul's interview and took, the relevant and salient things to the very specific things that Paul had said. But yeah, he, like Paul, was a visionary very early on. And, it's interesting because philosophy, worldview, all of these things are extremely important, but the ability to communicate them correctly is a huge part of it. You know, you can have the brilliant answer and sit in your house and be alone, but if you don't share it with everyone, for me, I found that effective media is film, you know, or documentary series or these kinds of things. But the early visionaries, you know, everything they said was dead on.
The interview with Paul sitting at the desk, the main interview, really sets the tone for the whole film, and that's what we keep coming back to. Did you film that first, middle, last, first to give you a roadmap for what the film would be about? Did you know you were going to do it that way? What was your process?
Yeah, we did it first and last. So we did 3 very long days right off the bat. And then maybe 8 months later, we did another 2 days. And then that's supplemented with a lot of audio only interviews. I like to do a lot of audio only interviews as you go, so that you're constantly talking about the story, or maybe someone else told you something that you didn't know about, so you can bring that up, and it allows you to experiment. So, for example, when we were leaving Cocos Island, we had this huge rainstorm, and so of course, Christian Demetrius, the cinematographer, and my above water cinematographer, Logan, you know, we all ran out there with the cameras and we're filming the storm for no apparent reason other than it was beautiful. And we're running up to the captain and we're like, turn the floodlight over here. And, you know, for a while we were like, wait, maybe we shouldn't be standing out here, because it was a pretty good storm. And, you know, I've got my seasick patch on, and like we're going everywhere. And it was quite an experience. And then as an experiment later, Paul read some passages from Moby Dick, some of the songs and poems that are at the beginning. And then as I was flying back, I was like, I think we need to try that with the storm footage, you know? And we ended up putting that together. And there are these transition moments in the film. There's a lot of information. And then you have these single shots of a whale from Tonga, where Christian was holding his breath for 2 minutes. And the whale, if you look at it, there's no editing. It's one single shot of a whale coming by. Now, yes, we shot at 80 frames per second, so we slowed it down, and you know, so it looked, you know, so it would last that long. But I don't even know where I'm going with this. But there was a lot of planning, and then I like to leave room for tons of improvisation. You know,
that's the secret of documentary filmmaking. You've got to be flexible. You've got a day that's already planned out for 12 hours, and somebody says, "Hey, what about this?" And you go, "Yeah," and
that's right.
You also went against the typical filmmaking, especially documentary filmmaking interview style of wide shot, medium, close up. You know, you get emotional, you go in very, very tight, and you kept it pretty wide most of the time. Occasionally you cut to a side shot. And then what I had never seen before was superimposing footage on one side of the screen, which was illustrating what Captain Paul was talking about. You wouldn't have been able to do that if you were in a close-up. Did you think of that in advance? Where did that idea come from? It's wonderful, very successful.
Oh, thank you. That, a couple of things. We used a large format camera in that interview, right? So we used the Alexa 65. And the reason that I wanted to use that camera is because, you know, if you're in focus here, the focus is so perfect that it's out of focus here. And Paul is this larger than life character. So if you have this in focus and this is slightly out of focus, it has this wrapping effect visually. And he just looks amazing, you know, in there. And so I chose that camera and those lenses for that reason. And then I wanted a lot of negative space on either side of the camera, because this is, at that time, that's a foreign place for Paul to be. He's used to being on the ship, but he's now grounded for reasons that you learn in the film, and because of the remaining red notice and all of that. So I felt that really showed us, you know, fish out of water. type of thing. And then later, I'm like, you know what? I need to show people that we're not manipulating what Paul's saying. So if he's talking passionately for 2 minutes, if I cut to this footage that's on the side, then it looks like we did that to edit, right? And so we started experimenting with it, and what angle do we put it at? And first it didn't look very good, because we did it in the Avid, and then we kind of had it at the angle of the wall and kept that forced perspective. And it's a way for you to listen to him, but it felt like you were in his head imagining those things. So I hadn't done that before, and Big Star in New York helped me develop that. And it's something I might do again, because I thought it communicated the idea really well.
It's very successful. It looks like I'm going over our time, so I'm going to have 2 more questions. Captain Paul, are you hopeful about our seas? Watching it, I'm not so much.
Well, I'm always hopeful, but I learned this lesson a long time ago. Back in 1973, when I volunteered as a medic for during the occupation of Wounded Knee by the American Indian Movement, and we were surrounded, overwhelming force. And I went to Russell Means, who was the leader of the American Indian Movement. I said, "Look, we can't win. Where the odds against us are overwhelming." And he said something that stayed with me for all my life. And he said, well, we're not concerned about the odds against us, and we're not concerned about winning or losing. We're here because this is the right thing to do, the right place to do it, and the right time to do it. Don't worry about the future. Focus on the present. What you do in the present will define the future. So that's really where you put your energies, is on the present. And I'm not going to get depressed about the future. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that the future is good for all living things. And whether we win or not is irrelevant. We can only focus on doing the best we can.
I hope everybody watching will take that into their hearts for everything they're doing in the world to make it a better place. Leslie, can you tell us what you're doing for distribution, especially educational distribution? I felt like every junior high school student in America should want to watch this film, maybe in small bites. And I say junior high because younger children may be too freaked out, but maybe some of the middle schoolers won't have completely been set in their ways in their lives.
Yeah. I think depending on your kid, like 11 and up is kind of the right age. I've had friends say that they're showing their younger kids, and I'm like, no. And they showed them, and they had great conversations afterwards, and it was fine. But yes, we do. So we ran on Animal Planet in the US, and then in close to 50 countries, we were on either Animal Planet or Discovery. Right now, because of the Animal Planet release schedule throughout the world, about 6 months later, iTunes and all of those things follow. So in the US and Canada, you can either find us on Discovery or Animal Planet or iTunes and some of the services like that. And then we're doing educational distribution as well. And then I just got the link yesterday where there's a distributor called Giant, and we're doing DVDs with them. And you would think
I work with them.
You do? Okay. Yeah. You would
Yes.
think no more DVDs, but for classrooms, still a lot of classrooms want the DVD because they don't have the streaming access in that particular classroom. So we're doing that as well, and continuing to do, awesome festivals like yours.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you both very much for taking the time. I'm glad you were on the bus, Leslie, with that woman from Sea Shepherd who put you in touch and made this happen. Captain Paul, I can't thank you enough for the work that you've done and continue to do. Thank you for your service. And I hope everybody tells everybody they've ever known about this film, and everybody should watch it. Thanks so much. Take care.
Great
you.
questions, Roger. Thank you.